Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It's day 174, June the 23rd, and we're in 1 Kings chapter 14. And I'll read a few verses and then we can talk about Jeroboam and what's going on in his life. It says, at that time, Jeroboam's son Abijah became very sick. So Jeroboam told his wife, disguise yourself so that no one will recognize you as my wife. Then go to the prophet Ahijah or Ahijah. I don't know which one it is. I don't think the J's are silent in that language. At Shiloh, the man who told me I would become king. I take him a gift of 10 loaves of bread, some cakes, and a jar of honey, and ask him what will happen to the boy. So Jeroboam is the king. Ahijah had told him he was going to be king. But we'll read this in a little while, he has ignored God and done more evil than everybody else before him. But now his son is dying. He's not dead, he's dying. And he wants to get all religious and I haven't talked to him since I've been king. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to go talk to him. And we see this often in church. Like, people, I don't really care anything about church until they have a crisis. Mm-hmm. And then, man, they are present. And sometimes ultra spiritual, What makes people want God to bail them out when they've ignored him all of this time? What if they don't believe he's good enough for everyday life? Why are they after him in a crisis to try to solve a problem?
I think at that point, for most people, they've already tried everything else. It's beyond their ability, financially, relationally, whatever case may look like, to fix it. So that's the last resort, and so they're willing to reach out and ask. They oftentimes, just like in this story, they often won't ask God themselves. They want you to be the conduit or someone else. They'll go to that person. It's not uncommon. You get a phone call or somebody come see you, and they want you to pray for them urgently, right here, right now. They've ignored God completely, but perhaps they recognize you haven't, and they want you to be their go-between to hook you up with God to call in a favor, as it were. I mean, that's the perception of it.
I get it.
And sometimes, listen, I'm going to ask you a question that maybe, it's not difficult. You may not want to answer. Do you sometimes get frustrated with people like that?
I do.
Yes.
So, Facebook knows my algorithm enough. All right, so they have identified things that I'm interested in enough that if somebody is asking for prayer, it shows up in my newsfeed. Like if you were to look at my newsfeed, the two things that would dominate it are anniversaries and people asking for prayer, because it learns you and then it just gives you the things that it knows you're going to comment on. Well, the two things that I'm going to comment on, if you have an anniversary, I'm going to say happy anniversary. I don't wish people happy birthday, but I do for anniversary. And I tell people I'm praying for you. But I got to be honest. There are some people who come across there so frequently, I'm like,
delete.
No, I'm not deleting them, but I'm not deleting. I'm not deleting them, but I'm like, everything is a crisis.
Yes.
Everything, every day, every situation, it's a crisis. And and they say right this minute, if you can just drop what you're doing and pray for. I'm like, why don't you drop what you're doing and straighten your life up, and then you wouldn't have to be asking everybody else to drop what they're doing. Yeah, that's terrible. You ask a question.
I don't feel nearly as bad now.
Made you feel better.
That's right. Because there are, it seems, that people who live their life in or around, quote, crisis, and I'm convinced they want it to be a public thing, the way they present it, and at some point in time, for those persons that don't get blocked or deleted, it's like, I'm not even reading this. It's the same old song and dance, unfortunately. But sometimes the people who have run from God or intentionally resisted God, and they come like, I want you to pray for me, I want you to, and you're like, like you said, if you spend half as much effort trying to get right with God in a relationship as you do trying to get out of crisis, things will look different for your life altogether.
Yeah. Cheryl, how do you feel about people who have no concerns about spirituality until trouble comes, and it's a regular thing? It's not like it's a one-time thing. How do you feel about it?
I mean, I guess usually people feel like in their daily life they're handling everything okay. They don't really need any help until something that feels totally out of their control comes along, and then they want to go to God because they think, okay, I can't do this. There's nothing I can do about it. I need some help.
Yeah. So, she puts on a wig, and in my mind, unfortunately, right this, I don't know what she does. I'm thinking about, so as we're recording this, we're on the heels of a deputy that helped a guy escape from prison in Alabama. She was a female deputy, he was a male prisoner, and it was Alabama, Mississippi, somewhere down there, and they ended up catching them in Indiana. And but one of the things it said about her is that she was so easy to spot because she was wearing a wig, and I think about cheesy disguises, in some of the shows that I've seen, coming up. But anyway, she disguises herself. The Lord tells her that he's coming, and it seems like he must be old enough that he might not have been able to recognize her even if she hadn't have disguised herself.
It says he was an old man, the prophet was, and could no longer see. And my thing is, why do you want to disguise her or for her to be disguised when they're going to inquire about the boy?
Right.
I mean, who else would have an interest in the boy
Except the parents.
That's exactly right. So I'm like, that didn't even make sense.
Yeah.
But I guess, like you said earlier, they must not have wanted anybody to know.
That they were,
because they'd been so
right.
wicked.
Right. I don't want people to know I'm talking to the prophet,
Just the opposite of what a Christian might not want somebody to know if they're doing something wrong.
Right.
This wicked, evil guy didn't want people to know that he was turning to a godly
Right,
source.
because I got these other gods, and
Yeah.
my God ain't coming through for me. Now I'm seeking the one I've rebuked. But it says, I ripped the kingdom away from the family of David and gave it to you, but you have not been like my servant David, who obeyed my commands and followed me with all of his heart and always did whatever I wanted. You have done more evil than all who lived before you. You have made other gods for yourself and have made me furious with your gold calves. And since you have turned your back on me, I will bring disaster on your dynasty and will destroy every one of your male descendants, slave and free alike, anywhere in Israel. I will burn up your royal dynasty as one burns up trash until it is gone. God had given him, so this Ahijah had been the one that told him, you're going to be the king. I'm taking it from Solomon or Solomon's family, you're going to be the king. So he's given a God-given opportunity, but he wastes it. What causes us to waste clear God-given opportunities? Why do we waste them? I don't know. That's the only way I know to ask it.
There can be a multitude of reasons. For Jeroboam, perhaps it was the mere fact that he was a descendant. There was an expectation, that he was going to have this. It was just going to be given to him. And I think when we take things for granted, including opportunities, resources, relationships, that we don't see it as the significant opportunity that truly has been presented, that it is unique. He had an expectation of it being handed to him, but he didn't have the value of what had been handed to him. And I think that's one of the many reasons that we may miss or not take advantage of opportunities. We have an expectation they're going to be ours anyway.
Sure. Why do we squander God-given opportunities?
I would assume in his case, if the foundation had not been laid that he had always worshiped God or grown up in a family where he had, then why would he have suddenly made that turn when this thing was laid in his lap? Because, if that's not how he grew up or it wasn't his belief system, why would he have recognized that as something that had come from God Do you know what I'm saying? Why would you attribute it to something that
Right.
you're not really familiar with, and then all of a sudden make this turn? Not that he shouldn't have, but he probably didn't. And so I think that's probably something that we do a lot too. We don't attribute it to who it should be attributed to. We just think, well, it's good luck, or in his case, maybe he expected it. You know, it was something he always thought would happen.
So verse 12 and 13 says, Then Ahijah told or said to Jeroboam's wife, Go on home, and when you enter the city, the child will die. Like, I have several questions here that brings to my mind. It says, All Israel will mourn for him and bury him. He is the only member of your family who will have a proper burial, for this child is the only good thing that the Lord, the God of Israel, sees.
That's a tough statement.
I'm telling you, sees in the entire. He's the baby Jesus of the family.
The only good thing.
Yeah, the only good thing.
And he's going to take him.
Yeah, but he's going to die when she goes back into the city. What happens if she don't go back into the city?
I was wondering about that. If she decided not to go back.
Yeah, what happens if she just says, what happened? I wonder if she's the problem. I don't know. I mean, we've seen, spouses. We've talked about the power of spouses turning the other way. But the question that I wrote, actually, before I just read that, is, if you knew your child was going to die, how would you respond? Like, what do you think? Like, if I told you today, both of you have a boy and a girl, if I told you one of your kids were going to die at this time, and it was in short order, both of your kids are young, relatively young, how do you think you would respond?
It depends on whether or not you told me they were only going to die if I went back home. I probably wouldn't go back home.
FaceTime.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, in my mind, as in this situation, because one, they already know this is a man of God, because he had predicted prior to that Jeroboam was going to be the king. That's why she is sent there. He knows who she is. He when she gets there, he speaks out to her, Jeroboam's wife, come on in, I know you're here. So he's already clearly demonstrated that he has a direct link with God. It would seem to me, and to answer your question, I think at this point I would be pleading with the man of God to plead my case to God and asking, what can I do to change
what can we do?
Absolutely. Is there something I can do to help change this situation in order to spare this child? And it doesn't appear that any of that took place.
No, it's like, okay,
He's
let's
like,
go back to the house.
That's the way it's got to be.
Yeah. So be it. I want to worship my gold calves or whatever it is I need to do. So verse 14 through 16, it says, In addition, the Lord will raise up a king of Israel who will destroy the family of Jeroboam. This will happen today, even now. Then the Lord will shake Israel like a reed whipped about in a stream. He will uproot the people of Israel from its good land that he gave their ancestors, and will scatter them beyond the Euphrates River. For they have angered the Lord with the Asherah poles they have set up for worship. He will abandon Israel because Jeroboam sinned and made Israel sin along with him. He sinned and he made, that's what it says, he made them. We don't typically think of the leader sinned, he made everybody else sin. But the question I have is, how do leaders influence people into ungodliness? Is it blatant, is it subtle, or is it accidental? And what I mean by that is, typically, even in our country, are the leaders blatantly trying to lead us to sin? Are they sinful and accidentally leading us to sin? Or are they smart and conniving and subtly leading us to sin?
Yes. All the above.
Yeah.
It depends on the leader.
Okay.
What their motives are and how they figure out they're gonna get what they want, essentially.
Whether they're going to get reelected or not.
Yeah.
I think you could pick out examples of all three of those characteristics, though, where some make choices, decisions, quote, accidentally, that have influenced people in a negative way. The more dangerous ones are the ones that do it with intent. It's protracted. I think the reason I say I think those are more dangerous because they have the ability to sway and deceive people that otherwise would not have
The
been.
subtlety.
That's right, with subtlety over a long period of time. Whereas the ones that are overt and blatant about it, many people will recognize that immediately and at least resist that to whatever degree they can.
Can you give an example?
Let me think about one.
Cheryl, what do you find is the greatest threat to people? Subtle, manipulating people toward sinful behavior, blatant. You're stupid. This is what you should do, or accidental. What are the worst kind?
I mean, it's certainly all destructive, but I think that the subtle, manipulative type is probably the worst because somebody who is going to fall into that trap, and in the case of a really public leader, it could be a lot of people that are going to fall into it. It's really subtle, and it's a little bit at the time, and they begin to become convinced about small things first, and then once that foundation is laid, it continues to get pushed until they've ended up on a totally opposite side of something than they started on. And for a lot of people, I guess we don't recognize it until we're there, like we've talked about previously. How'd I get here?
Yeah,
Well,
that's right.
It's because you were following the wrong person,
Yeah, I think one of the valuable lessons out of this is not just for political leaders, people who have high office, but we all influence people.
Church leaders.
Yes.
Family leaders.
Yes.
Yeah, it's coaches. It's not just what I would say. I'm going to give you. I'm not going to give an example. I don't think, but I'll say, I think the least dangerous are the blatant. Because it's so opposite. You're like you can clearly.
That's
see
clearly
it,
defined.
right?
You can make a
the
choice.
subtle one, the manipulating, the conniving people that are trying to just move it just a little bit until they get to a place. Those are dangerous. And I would say the accidental ones are just as dangerous. Let's see if.
What do you mean by accidental?
So, there have been political leaders, for example, that have done some stupid things. Maybe personally, it could be as simple as, knowing about a crime that happened and that happened would have happened at Watergate, whether they instigated it or not, I don't know, but he knew. Or personal sins that become public knowledge. We've seen that happen in presidents. And when I describe that as accidental, I don't mean like that. Oops, I made a mistake for them. But when it becomes public, then other people are influenced by that, and they go, "Oh, he does that. I'm not so bad." And in the church, I think that's one of the dangers. I think we are right to say people are flawed and they're going to make mistakes. But the danger of how it's handled and how it comes out and how it's dealt with and whether we, has an influence on the other people who may be sitting around and going, "Oh, he's got that problem. I got that problem too." Yeah. And they begin to justify it. That's what I mean by accidental. It wasn't that leader wasn't trying to influence other people to do the same thing they're doing, but their stupidity caused other people to excuse their stupidity because
I can see that.
Because of it. So that's how I see it. All right, Jake, you want to close us in prayer?
Lord, we thank you for your word that has challenged us in this area of influence and obedience. Anytime we choose to disobey you, there's always consequences attached to it, not only for us, but those around us and those under our influence. Help us always to make choices and decisions that honor you, even when it's not popular, it's not easy or convenient, so that we'll be faithful to you and your kingdom and lead others toward you. In Jesus' name, amen.